Welcome to Hildestone College's quick lesson series where our teachers give you some English language tips.
Welcome to Quick Lessons. Today we're going to have a look at two words which students often confuse: study and learn. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I like to work with example sentences that I've heard students say or which I've seen them writing. So shall we move straight on to some examples? Have a look at these. I can't come out tonight because I'm learning for a test. I started studying English when I was 5. What do you think is the problem here? Well, you know me quite well by now. You know that there aren't any grammar mistakes here. And you've probably guessed that what you need to do is switch learning for studying. But do you know why? If you do, well done. You really don't need to watch any more of this video. But if you can't explain what's unnatural about these sentences, I'm going to do my best to explain it for you. So let's look at learn first. Now please note we have this slightly irregular spelling of the past tense in British English. If somebody is speaking, you probably wouldn't hear the difference. If you see it written down, then of course you'll notice. It's not something to worry about though. Either form is perfectly acceptable. It's just that in Britain we also have that T ending one. Now I looked in the Oxford Learner's Dictionary for a definition of learn, and there it tells us that learn means to get knowledge of a subject or skill, that's an important word, by experience, that's important too, by studying it or being taught. Now it's always interesting when a confusing word is in the definition of the word it's confused with. And so here you can see learn is the more general word and studying seems to be part of the definition. So that makes study more specific. We'll come back to that later. Let's have a look at the definition for study. Now again, just in case you forgot, remember the irregular spelling. Where you have a Y, it changes to an IE. And as you can see, there are also two meanings for the verb study. But the good news is they are connected. Now, the first meaning, so that means the most common, is to spend time learning about a subject by reading or going to college, etc. That's already more specific than the explanation we read for learn. We've got reading here specifically and going to college. Now, college could mean school or university, but it does exclude primary school, so the kind of school that small children go to. Colleges do tend to be for older teenagers, so that implies a more advanced level. If you now look at the second meaning, examine carefully, so to look at something in detail, this also shows that it means something more in-depth than just looking at something. So you need to use more thought, you need to pay more attention, you need to make more effort. Do you see how that connects with it being something at a higher level, something more academic than what we saw with learn? We're going to look at some collocations next. Now, collocations, in case you forgot, are just pairs or groups of words which you often see together. Good speakers of English prefer some combinations to others, and the only reason is that they just sound right. Now, they sound right because you often hear them together. And of course, you can see how that supports more people using them, so it sounds right when you hear it, and so on. And this is how it happens. So our first collocation here is learn from your mistakes. That sounds a lot like experience to me. You have to do something to make a mistake. That means you've had that experience. And remember how we read that learning is connected with having experience? Well, that's exactly what we have here. You can learn to drive, to swim, or to ride a bike. Well, those are skills, aren't they? They're practical activities, not theories. Sure, you can read about swimming. You can say that you've studied swimming, which would suggest that you know a lot about the theory. But that won't help you actually swim, will it? Because that's a practical activity. Finally, you learn about different cultures. Now, this could be practical experience or theoretical knowledge. Of course, you can study different cultures as well. But using learn here makes it clear that you're kind of thinking about what you need to do in practical situations. So those cultural do's and don'ts, that sort of thing. So in other words, that you know how to apply your knowledge in a practical way. So in a way here, we are actually also talking about a skill rather than purely theoretical knowledge. And that one is a little bit harder, isn't it? Now here are some collocations with study. And you can see the first two are linked. You can study at university, or you can study to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an architect, any of those things. You can see how they're linked, can't you? They are the more advanced levels of knowledge, and there's a lot of theory with these subjects. Now, of course, you might do an internship to develop your practical skills for these subjects. I'm not saying that there's nothing practical about them at all, but I am saying that you learn those practical skills by actually doing the job, for example, as an intern. What you study at university are the theories. You examine them closely, you memorize them, and you know about them in a lot of detail. Now, studying for an exam also means memorizing the things that you need to remember, and they're usually quite detailed. If they weren't detailed, you probably wouldn't need to study. If you need to study, you're saying that you need to make an effort and you need to concentrate hard. Well, that all sounds like advanced things, doesn't it? Don't worry if it's still not quite clear to you, because we'll have a look at some example sentences next, and I think that will probably help make it clearer. So here are some examples with learn. I didn't learn to ride a bike until I was about 7 years old. Well, riding a bike, that's a practical skill, isn't it? Did you start learning English at primary school? Do you remember we had that sentence right at the beginning? I started studying English when I was about 5, and I said that wasn't very natural. Well, that's because we would use learn here. And if you think back to learning English at primary school, you'll probably remember that you listened to stories and sang songs. And so in a way, really, you were experiencing English. You didn't work very hard to memorize lots of grammar rules. You didn't examine texts very carefully and analyze them. You didn't use that kind of detail, did you? It was at a much lower level. Now, look at the last example. This last one is true for me personally, and we're going to compare it to another sentence in just a moment. But I can certainly say I learned German by listening and speaking. I lived in Germany, and so I had to practice a lot. And that's actually how I improved my German. It was mainly experience. I didn't study grammar rules or make an effort to learn vocabulary. Not while I was living there. But it's also true that I studied German, and actually French as well, at university. And funnily enough, at school too. But that was where I studied grammar and I made an effort to memorize vocabulary. I studied it, but I didn't learn it very well. I actually needed lots of practice in Germany to be able to speak it. Now, of course, studying the language helped me, but I needed the experience of using the language too. And that's what's interesting about these verbs. They show that difference. I learned German in Germany. I didn't study it. I actually studied German in Britain and didn't learn it. I think that's really funny. It makes me laugh every time. The good news is I did learn it in the end and I can speak it now. Now, if you have a look at the second sentence, I didn't go to the party on Saturday because I was studying for my exams. That's okay too, because it's clear I was making an effort and looking at things in detail. I was probably memorizing things too. And finally, in the last sentence, I hope now you would also recognize that it's very, very strange to say that you learn literature. You can learn English or French or Arabic or any other language because of the connection with a practical skill. Because with languages, there's speaking, there's writing, understanding those languages. But with literature, study is the right choice because what you mean is you examine literature in detail. You look at when it was written, who wrote it, what techniques they used, and so on. Okay, so here's our summary now. Use learn if you're talking about a skill. So if you can rephrase what you're saying using how, you can use learn. So you might say, for example, that you want to learn English. You want to learn how to speak English, for example. So it's that practical skill that you're looking for. Most people don't really want to study grammar. They do that because they think it will improve their skills. You can see here, study isn't everything. Sometimes you need to learn how to do something. Now, if you can't use how, or you're talking about a higher academic level, which will almost always mean that you have to memorize theories, then you need to use study. If you're not sure, if you have any doubts, check a good learner's dictionary or a Collocations dictionary, they do exist, and then you might find an example sentence to help you or the collocation that you're looking for. I hope the difference is a little clearer for you now. And I hope to see you again soon for another quick lesson. Bye!
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please click on the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss the next video. That's it for this lesson. Until next time, goodbye!